Hello and welcome to the Ireland on the Fly podcast, covering the people and places about fly fishing in Ireland. So finally, the Drowes has opened its account for the season with its first fish caught on Valentines Day, followed 3 days later by one caught in the fly. Despite the high water and horrendous conditions, the odd angler is still persisting and occasionally being rewarded for their efforts. Spring salmon fishing is hard enough at this time of year without successive storms blowing in, so well done to the 20-year-old Nash McDaid for catching and releasing the fish. I caught up with Shane Gallagher from the Drowes Fishery to find out more.
We had a long wait this year. Our first salmon was caught on Friday, the 14th of February, on Valentine's Day, at about 2:45 in the afternoon. So that's really the longest wait that we've had for our first fish that I can remember, certainly. But when the fish was caught, it was a good decent fish. Now it was about 12 pounds, caught by a young 20-year-old angler, Nash McDaid, from Ballybuffet in County Donegal.
It was a red flying sea he caught it on, was it?
Yeah, he caught on a red flying sea. Actually, it's a bit of a record as well because his father Eddie caught the first salmon in 2016. So it's the first, to the best of my knowledge, first father and son team to have both caught the first salmon of the year from the river. No way,
family affair on it. Obviously, last Friday the conditions must have been pretty bad. Was the water pretty high that he was out on it?
The water was high. We had quite a bit of rain. First, we've had Storm Kira the weekend before last, and last weekend we had Storm Dennis. So the conditions really for the past fortnight have been quite high, quite bad, and the water levels have been high. But there's been very few anglers out. But Nash and his father Eddie have been persistent, and they've been out in conditions when other people haven't. So he was rewarded really on Friday with the prize of a springfish.
It just shows you, doesn't it, Shane? Or despite the conditions and obviously being really bad, and obviously your chances of catching a fish are much lower, there's always the chance.
There's always a chance. And then we had a second fish on Monday, actually, and from the mill pool, an 8-pound fish on fly on a Frankenstein that fished with a Skagit line. So, I've been, anybody that's been inquiring about conditions, I've been sort of dissuading them from travelling to fish because of the conditions, but it really does go to show you that you wouldn't expect fish to be caught, never mind fish on fly in the current water levels,
So is that the first salmon of the season on the fly then?
To the best of my knowledge, yeah, that's the first fish on anywhere in the country really on fly, yeah.
God, a fair play to him, because the conditions must have been atrocious.
Yeah, and just today as well, we've had more heavy rain, and the water levels are rising, and the water's become a little bit coloured, and I think it's approaching 1 metre on the gauge at the Four Masters Bridge, and more rain to come really for the next couple of days at least.
Does it get to a stage with the water conditions, like it does get past a certain level where you just say, look, there's absolutely 0 point, or is there always a chance at certain sections on the river?
It's funny, some anglers tend to prefer high water levels. Personally, when you're trying to find a river in the fields, it can be a needle in a haystack trying to catch it, trying to find a salmon, and just the flow of water as well. It's a really big push. So when water levels approach 1 metre, there's really only a small amount of pools that would be worth a throw at all, really.
Yeah, and it's really just a case that you just got to target certain small pockets of areas, cast the fly or get the spinner out and just try run it through those sections.
Yeah, I suppose where Nash got his fish, it's just maybe a couple of 100 yards from the sea, a place called the Point of the Meadow. And there had been a few fish spotted there, fresh fish lines. So he just said he'd try it again, and he was lucky. And then the mill pool where the second fish was caught, it's always there's always a chance of a fish there.
Fair play to him. You said it was on a Frankenstein on a Skagit sink tip, was it?
That's right, yeah. So he was really getting down. It's a case of really having to get down with the current levels.
For the anglers that are out this time of year in these conditions, real diehards.
Absolutely, it's not easy fishing. The fishing conditions are difficult, and the numbers of fish are not. There's not an abundance of fish, so it's. It's not easy, but a lot of them do it because it's not easy. A lot of them do it because it's difficult. And like a spring salmon in 2020 in Ireland is a real prize. You'll
also get the river to yourself almost, or the beat to yourself, because there's lots to be said for that.
There's been occasions there where maybe there's been one, maybe two anglers out. Weekends then there'd be obviously people are off work and there's more people out. But yeah, it's really the hardy souls that brave the elements in these conditions.
And Nash and his father, they're from Ballybuffet, isn't it?
They're from Ballybuffet, so they'd be regular anglers on the river. Nash has been fishing since he was maybe 12 or 11 or 12. So he's chuffed now, and I'm delighted for him as well. It's great to see a young angler being rewarded for persistence.
That was actually my next question. Is he one of the youngest?
He's that I remember. We had a very young angler caught the first salmon. I think it was 1982, and Nash is the youngest angler since 2003, when a Ballyshannon angler from another Donegal man, Joe Broderick, caught his fish. I think he was maybe 14 when he caught a fish from the Millpool. But I think it was around the middle of January in 2003.
There's a couple of, one is it's great to see such, the young anglers out there. People talk about, the dearth of young anglers, but it does show you they're, and if he's a 20-year-old and he's willing to get out in these conditions, he's very keen and enthusiastic. But also the fact that catch and release, he was willing to release it as well. So, it's kind of been inbred into the younger generation, this ethos.
Yeah, I suppose definitely younger anglers do tend to be more aware, and anglers in general are more aware of the need for conservation. So yeah, all credit to him. In fairness, I'm not sure if the bar of silver now was up for the prize, putting back the first fish has anything to do with it, but he's certainly a very keen angler, and he's very conservation minded. So it was great to see him putting the fish back.
He got the Drowes Perpetual Cup for the first salmon from the fishery.
That's right.
A 1 kilo bar of silver, and the Thomas Gallagher Conservation Cup all in one.
Yeah, for all at once. So it was a clean sweep of the boards for Nash. He was well rewarded, and he was about a couple of glasses of good Irish whiskey too up in the tackle shop when after he had this photograph taken.
Did we get a photo of the fish at all? Or?
Yeah, I got a photograph of him just before the fish was released down at the point of the meadow. So. A nice, deep, clean, well-made fish,
Yeah, fresh in off the tide.
Fresh in off the tide, yeah. Just as I say, just a couple of 100 yards from the sea.
Is that 12 pounds a kind of an average weight for this time of year?
No, I think 12 pounds would be heavier than normal. I think spring fish on the Drowes now the average would be in or around maybe 9.5 to 10 pounds, something like that for a spring fish. The second fish was 8 pounds. So that'll give you sort of the range, I suppose in the current water levels, you're not really going to see spring fish shown, and in one way, it's good to have a prolonged flood. I know it's not ideal for angling conditions, but it's a good chance for spring fish to get up and also to clean the system out of kelps. And it's the water table now is going to be higher going into for the rest of the spring. So it's I know it's difficult to fish in these conditions, but it's good for the catchment as a whole and for the fishery as a whole, really.
So do you think for salmon anglers listening, from what you're saying, this bodes well maybe when the system clears out and when the river drops to more fishable levels? Yeah,
I think there's no doubt about it. There are the fish runs are later. I think we talked about that and earlier on in the season, but I think we should start to see more fish turning up now, and I would expect when conditions return to more favourable conditions for fishing that we will see more fish being caught as well.
Just looking ahead to the short term in terms of the conditions, Shane, is there more rain, more storms coming in?
Yeah, that's the forecast. It's been very unsettled with wind, and it's quite cold, so hail, sleet, and persistent rain. It started off with drizzle this morning, but it's got progressively more intense rain now as the day has worn on. So the levels are, with the OPW site, you can see that the levels climbing, and it'll probably be over a metre by nightfall.
Are you expecting it maybe to start dropping next week?
Yeah, it'll probably once we get a few dry days, it won't be long dropping to more fishable levels. But the forecast for over the weekend and even the long-term forecast, it doesn't always come true what is forecast a week ahead, but it's looking to remain pretty unsettled for the foreseeable future.
What's the level for anglers to keep an eye on where they think, okay, it's starting to drop, it's worth me getting in touch with Shane?
Yeah, it's very hard to say because Like when water levels are out on the fields and a lot of the banks are covered, anybody that's travelling in any distance, I wouldn't encourage them to come really, because and especially if there's going to be high winds, it's just not comfortable fishing conditions. But I think as Nash showed and that other fishing Monday, there's always a chance even in high water levels, but the conditions it's not pleasant maybe to be out in it or to fish in. But certainly once the water goes below 0.9 metres on the gauge, it's more favourable and more pools will be available to fish.
Is this as bad as you can remember in terms of rainfall for this time of year?
No, I think there's often floods in February are quite normal. And like at the weekend on the RT News, it was one of the weather forecast was that the Drowes had burst its banks, and people were contacting me to see if there was any damage done. But it burst its banks in a place that's been flooding since I can remember in its natural floodplain. So it's not an unusual event by any means. We had an unusual weather event, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, when the level was, I think, 1.3 metres, and my own house was almost flooded, and the Four Masters Bridge was damaged. But the current levels are, you'd expect a flood like this this time of the year every season,
So touch wood, we've a way to go before it gets to that 1.3 level.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. We spoke before, Shane, about how difficult it is in terms of salmon numbers at this time of year and how the run is a bit later. And now coupled with these storms, one after another, and the kind of incessant rain where anglers can't get out. I've been itching to get out the last few weeks myself with the Blackwater opening, and I haven't been able to. It's kind of hampering everything together, isn't it, in terms of anglers can't get out, you can't get fishing, and if you can't get fishing, you can't catch fish. So, you're not going to get reports of numbers.
Exactly. I suppose it is a bit of catch-22. Like I was talking to anglers before Nash caught that fish, and I didn't hold out any hopes of any fish being reported that weekend either. So I suppose salmon fishing, it's you have to be the eternal optimist, and you have to take your chance. But certainly, when you turn your mind to going on the riverbank and it's howling a gale and there's big water, it's not very encouraging, and especially when maybe the prospect of catching a fish because of reduced salmon numbers aren't, the expectations have to be tempered.
So I suppose the advice then to Shane is for anglers to keep an eye on the weather forecast, keep an eye on the gauge, and if they are considering it, to drop you an email or a call.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I say, anybody that's travelling a long distance currently, I would say just keep an eye on the water levels. Certainly contact me. But even though there's 1 or 2 fish being caught now, I wouldn't encourage anybody to travel long distances in the current conditions, to be honest, And in
the meantime, to keep your appetite whetted, do check out the photo of Nash with the fresh fish. It's tantalising when you see the silver belly on it.
When you see a nice stout silverfish, it certainly will whet your appetite.
Yeah. Well, fair play to him, and fair play to him for releasing it as well. And Shane, well done on for the first fish this season caught and released, and also caught on fly as well on Monday. So it's great news despite the conditions. So we'll be hopeful when the conditions make it more favourable.
Hopefully it'll give a bit of heart now to anglers all over the country that I know my season really doesn't start officially until there's a fish caught, so I think now we're well underway, and hopefully it's onwards and upwards from here.
Brilliant. Shane, thanks a million for your time.
Thanks, Dara. All the best.
My thanks to Shane Gallagher from the Drowes Fishery for that update. In the meantime, don't forget to rate, review and subscribe to the Ireland on the Fly podcast on Apple, Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts from. You can also keep up to date on IrelandOnTheFly.com as well as on Instagram at IrelandOnTheFly. I'll be back next week with another episode on the people and places of fly fishing in Ireland, so do join me then.